Luke 22, verse 36, is still used today to claim Jesus gave Christians a blanket command to arm themselves for personal defense, for protection of home or neighbor, or even to justify Christian participation in law enforcement. For example, Christians joining the police or the military. But a closer, more informed look shows that this is not what Jesus ever meant. The passage must be interpreted in context, with its meaning confined to that specific moment. The first thing to note is that Jesus is contrasting two periods of the disciples' ministry. Earlier, in Luke chapters 9 and 10, he sent them out with nothing, no money, no bag, no extra clothing, and God provided their every need. But now, on the night of his arrest, Jesus tells his apostles that things are about to change. Evil is coming. The world is about to treat the holy and righteous one as a criminal, enemy of the state, and the apostles will be caught up in that same treatment. Yet even in this moment, Jesus is not telling them to arm themselves in order to fight. When Peter tries to behead one of the soldiers and instead cuts off his ear, Jesus immediately rebukes Peter, and according to Matthew's version of the event, he says to Peter, "Put your sword back in its place, for all who take the sword will perish by the sword." If Jesus meant the disciples to use weapons to defend him or to defend themselves, then Jesus would not have rebuked Peter at all. He could simply have healed the wounded soldier and allowed the disciples to continue to protect him. But Jesus did not. Jesus stopped the violence on the spot by saying, "This is your hour and the power of darkness." These words are unique to Luke's account and imply that armed resistance belongs to the realm of supernatural evil. Compare Satan entering Judas at the beginning of the Passion narrative, here in Luke chapter 22. Why then did Jesus mention swords? Because he himself said it was to fulfill the prophecy of Isaiah 53 verse 12. The Messiah would be numbered with the transgressors, that is, criminals. In effect, Jesus is saying, I'm about to be treated like a criminal, and that means you will be counted among criminals too. And when the disciples eagerly pull out two literal swords, Jesus replies, "It is enough." In Greek, this phrase simply means, enough of this. Now think about this. Two swords for 11 disciples against a militia? That makes no sense if Jesus was preparing them for self-defense or his own. But it makes perfect sense if the swords are simply props to fulfill the prophecy from Isaiah. This interpretation, this non-violent reading of events, was the understanding of most Christians for the first 4 centuries of the church, because it simply fits everything else Jesus ever taught on this matter. Blessed are the peacemakers, love your enemies, bless those who curse you, pray for those who mistreat you. When they persecute you in one town, flee to the next. I am sending you out like sheep among wolves. My kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight. The swords in Luke 22 were not instructions for Christians to arm themselves. They were signs pointing to prophecy, not weapons meant for warfare. For what it's worth, this view is affirmed by most modern-day mainstream biblical scholars, Catholic, Orthodox, and Protestant alike. Now, Christians can and do debate other issues like the so-called just war theory. There is room in the larger biblical conversation for that. But what we cannot do, what we must not continue to do, is take Luke 22:36 out of context and make it say something Jesus himself immediately contradicted. Again, the command to buy a sword is not an invitation for Christians to arm themselves or join any law enforcement. It is part of Jesus' journey toward the cross, where he will conquer, not by killing his enemies, but by praying for his enemies with his last dying breath. Father, forgive them, because they do not know what they are doing. That is the gospel of peace Christians are commanded to preach in order to enter his coming kingdom of God on a restored earth.